On certification, and again I want to thank our sponsors and our partners. That's Sharia Wiz, Iswa Halal and U.S. Muslim Chamber of Commerce, American Halal Council, Saffron Road, the Standards and Metrology Institute of Islamic Countries, Americans for Vibrant Palestinian Economy, Halal Watch World, Helping Hand, Guidance Residential, Ibrik Technologies, and H2 Growers. And now we're going to have a short video from one of our sponsors.
We're all philosophers, pioneers with a mission to be brave, authentic, to immerse ourselves in new experiences, to share discoveries, creations, to keep the bad stuff out and make responsible choices. These are choices we make in our heads, our hearts, and on our table. And philosophies on food can mirror those in life. For over a decade, our mission has been to inspire and connect people through a delicious premium world cuisine. At Saffron Road, we see each meal as the next stop on your journey, an opportunity for discovery and personal growth. We explore international cuisines that combine bold flavors with high-quality, wholesome ingredients from family farmers we know and trust. With every global culinary adventure, each simmering desire to progress for a cleaner and greener world, we look to chart a better course. Better for the environment, better for farmers, for animals, better for your health. Because ethical food, free of artificial ingredients, antibiotics, or GMOs, transcends language, religion, and culture. So by eating it, making it, learning about it, and sharing it, our path is on a journey to better. Where will your journey take you? Saffron Road, Journey to Better.
Great. Thank you very much, Marwan. One of our sponsors, Saffron Road. So, Peter, are you able to, did you sort your presentation out?
Can you unmute him on your end, Elizabeth? There we go.
It doesn't show that he's muted.
I've asked Marwan to present it for me since I was having difficulty in
Okay.
sharing.
All right.
You were fine. We saw the presentation earlier. Just try.
Salam alaikum. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak about accrediting halal certifiers and what that means with regard to compliance with the standards.
Welcome.
Is the presentation up?
Not yet. While it's coming up, let me just introduce you, Peter. So Peter Unger has been involved with accreditation since 1978. He served as the president since 1996. Before that, the vice president of A2LA from 1986 and associate manager of laboratory accreditation since 1988 with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He has also served as the chair of the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation from 2010 to 2016, and he's the author of many papers on accreditation and active participant in the establishment of ISO IEC standards for accreditation, and also the author of a book on achieving accreditation for your laboratory. So, Peter, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for the introduction. Is the presentation able to be presented?
I'm loading it.
You have it?
I'm
Okay.
loading it right now.
Okay. Yes, my talk, I think, follows up nicely with the previous session's discussion. How do we go about accrediting the certifiers for halal and in order to maintain the standards for halal? The number one issue is how do we provide confidence to the marketplace that products that are being claimed as halal are indeed halal. And this is where the need for competent certification comes in. And then the question is, how do we ensure the certification bodies are competent? What is accreditation? It's an independent recognition of conformity assessment bodies against recognized standards to ensure their impartiality and competence to carry out specific tests, inspections, and or certifications. I'm doing it. Accreditation is spelled out. Oh my God. Sorry. Let me start over again. I was looking at my own screen instead of what I see here. IQEST stands for the International Quality Excellence in Infrastructure Systems. It's a company with myself as president and my partner and wife, Silvana Ricciarini. Next slide. So, as I've said earlier, I'm very interested in following up the topic previously with my presentation. I'm glad that you have provided me this opportunity. Thank you very much. The next slide. So, the whole issue is how do we make sure that we're confident that products that are claimed to be halal are indeed halal? And that is where certification bodies come in to certify products as halal, meeting the various standards in which the product has to enter in the marketplace. And of course, how do we ensure that the certification bodies are actually doing the job competently? And that's where accreditation comes in. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail next. So what is accreditation? An independent recognition that conformity assessment bodies are competent and impartial to carry out any specific tests, inspections, and or certifications, typically called conformity assessment bodies. In particular, in the halal business of products, product certification is the type of conformity assessment that we're talking about. Next. The World Trade Organization's Technical Barriers to Trade Agreement cites accreditation as a possible, in effect, trade facilitator, which could be used by governments in their regulations to help facilitate the acceptance of exports to the rest of the world. In other words, providing some assurance that the foreign conformity assessment bodies, the certification bodies, have indeed demonstrated their competence for particular types of certification, and in this case, halal certification. And in that way, we can have confidence in the marketplace that what has been certified is indeed halal. Next. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, there's standards for accreditation bodies that have been long established. 17,011 is requirements for accreditation bodies. 17,065 is, in effect, accreditation requirements for certifying products. And 17,021 is accreditation requirements for certifying management systems of companies. Those standards, next slide, Next slide, please. Yeah. There's a number of other relevant conformity assessment standards, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm listing them so that you get an idea of what are the relevant standards that support accreditation and certification. Next slide, please. So, I think Habib mentioned this earlier. Gulf Standards Organization has adopted, in effect, their standards have adopted the ISO standards 17065 and 17021 as part of the general requirements for certification bodies, as well as general requirements for halal accreditation bodies. They have added a little bit of halal specific requirements, but they're generally 90% of the same as the ISO standards. Next slide, please. There are a number of standards around the world that are being used. GSO's got standards that are, in effect, standards for certification. Several countries have their own standards. And I may say, in light of the discussion that we had at the previous session, there's a lot of commonality among these standards. I know there are some country differences, but most of it is based on the general guidelines that come from CIMAC, but they're tailored for the national particular region, as was spelled out at the last presentation. There may be some regional differences, maybe some political differences, and clearly some differences in the philosophy or the schools of thought, as mentioned earlier. Next slide. So I'm just identifying some other standards that are being used by certification bodies and by companies. If you want to export to Malaysia for your cosmetics, you have to meet the Malaysian standard. Similarly, halal pharmaceuticals in Malaysia. CIMAC has general requirements, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're very similar and adopted by Malaysia as well as other countries. Next slide. Now, this pyramid or hierarchy illustrates, I think, what we're trying to accomplish globally. There are a lot of accreditation bodies around the world. They've come together in the last 20 to 25 years in a couple of global cooperations. International Accreditation Forum are accreditation bodies that actually accredit certification bodies. There is a halal, International Halal Accreditation Cooperation, Accreditation Forum, IHAF, which has come together that involves accreditation bodies from around the world, not only from CIMAC countries, but other countries as well. The point of the cooperation is to get each accreditation body's accreditations recognized so that they can be accepted in other countries, and to avoid duplication of accreditation. Quite often, if there's no recognition of the accreditations, your domestic body might accredit you, but you find out if you want to export or have your certifications accepted in other countries, you might have to get accredited by the accreditation bodies in those countries. That is a tremendous waste of resources that we're trying to avoid. So accreditation is done using the international standards that I cited earlier. The conformity assessment bodies are identified as competent to provide the certification for the various product standards. And in the case of halal, of course, certification bodies may only be competent to provide certain certifications for certain country standards and not others. So the scope of accreditation is related to the specific type of certification standards that they have demonstrated competence to their accreditation body. And ultimately, we hope that the product and service providers of these halal products that are properly certified by accredited conformity assessment bodies, accredited certification bodies, can provide the confidence, trust, and assurance to the governments and the consumers of the product and purchasers of the product. With that, next slide, please. Thank you again for your attention. I'm certainly hoping to answer any questions or any follow-up. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. That was very informative. Habib, would you like to continue? Are you on mute? You're on mute. Can I unmute you? I can't.
Yeah.
No, we can't. We can't hear you.
Habib, if you below under your video, there is an icon for microphone. So,
I get it. I get it now. Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Peter. And I will just answer the question, who are the halal certifiers and who give them the power? It's not really a power. It is, like Peter said, it's a process. You have ISO standards, that, and GSO and CIMIC and Malaysia, but they may be different, but they're under one roof, under the accreditation bodies that have peer evaluations. And you have the conformity assessment, like I have, and the ones that do different schemes. There are some schemes that only do slaughter, some do further processing, some do cosmetics, some do oils, some do the latest one we added in our schemes is transportation, and storage, because you can have halal products and then it's mixed with some pork products and there could be contamination. I'll give a typical example in storage. It happened in Mississippi a few years back. There was those tornadoes, or how do you call it? When you have the big rain, how do you call it?
Hurricane.
Hurricanes. So the power outage, but the storage had some halal products, and there were some pork items on top, and it melted because there's no electricity, and the blood from that pig came down and contaminated the halal. So there's a requirement for also storage and transportation. Having said that, the answer is, who are the halal certifiers? I would have loved if Ehsan was here. We are not NGOs, but we are individual bodies that start basically from Islamic centers, and then they run into, first we start individually, then we grow into an Islamic body, then we grow into, now it may not be NGO, but individual companies that have met the standards and they have the confidence and the privileges given to them after they have applied with accreditation bodies like JAC, IAC, or even Malaysia, to be able to meet those standards with the documentation and the proper manpower and the office. And we have also insurance up to $1 million for any possibilities, which is all these are new. Malaysia has theirs, CIMIC has theirs. You have 17065, which Peter rightly said, the Gulf people just took 17065 and just renamed it as GSO for their convenience, with little changes which they use in GSO 993 about the slaughter. But basically it's the same as ISO. So the power is given when you have met and you have proved that you are competent to be able to deliberate and do the procedures. You cannot have conflict of interest. You have to have trained auditors who are Sharia and technical auditors. You have to have committees. We have 5 different committees that are required, by the accreditation body. And you have decision committees. You have committees for policies. You have committees for complaints and compliance. So you have to meet all these requirements in order to be given that piece of paper that says you are now qualified to issue certificates. And that is, in a nutshell, the answer. I can go more, but I don't want to go more. I will leave it for discussion. But Peter, correct me if I'm wrong. Did I say anything out of?
Well, I might add that the committees that you talk about have been identified in the GSO standard for
Exactly.
bodies. And those are the add-ons that are on top of 17,065 general requirements for product certification bodies. The other thing I might add, being compliant with the general requirements is necessary, but not sufficient, because what you're actually accredited for is the competence to certify specific products to specific standards. So certification bodies will have an accreditation scope that specifies the product and the standards. So that's Singapore, Malaysia, CIMIC, GSO. That's the certification body needs to demonstrate to the accreditation body that they're competent to audit to those standards. And that's put on their scope. Some certification bodies are only accredited for a very narrow scope, maybe say meat products. Others provide a full array of certification, which so a product manufacturer, a supplier, needs to go to a certification body that actually is accredited and found competent to provide certification that would help to facilitate the acceptance of their product in the export markets of relevance to them. So that is, unfortunately, because there's so many national standards, the certification bodies have a huge challenge to make sure that they have the auditors trained and competent to actually understand and fulfill the auditing requirements on particular manufacturers against those standards. And
yes, I would like to touch on one thing. Elizabeth, and I think I discussed this with Marwan before. There are many people that say, well, I'm a Muslim, I slaughter, I'm selling, I have a shop. Number one, you cannot certify what you sell, okay? And number two, the qualifications of a halal certifier, you have to be a real organization. You have to have the staff. You have to have the training. You have to meet the scopes. If you slaughter beef only, you cannot issue a certificate for hot dog. It has to be for the process. If you are approved for scope C, you cannot issue a certificate for pharmaceuticals or for let's say cosmetics. Cosmetics is a whole different line. I know the guys that will be awarded the certificate today for the cosmetics. It's a whole different scope and scheme. So the qualifications for a halal certifier is, of course, with us, we require that the body has to be an Islamic body. But some countries like Egypt, they don't require you to be a Muslim. But we do not, we think in our standard it has to be Muslim. And Brother Ihsan, if you're on, you can add on to that. But
So you're talking
yes,
about
you have to meet all those
certifier.
requirements, Elizabeth. You have to meet all those requirements. So, and it costs money to bring those people from Saudi or UAE or Malaysia or Indonesia or even Turkey. You have to pay for their ticket. You have to pay for their hotels. You have to take care of the training, like people like Peter do training. And you have to train all the people involved, even the members of those committees. They may not be auditors, but they need to be trained to know what the requirements are, and they have to have a certificate. If you don't have that piece of paper in your hand, as a member of that organization, you cannot be accepted to work on the halal certification process at all.
So if you were a US company that wanted to become a certifier, what would be the steps that you would have to do to start that process? Who do you go to, first of all? Because it sounded
depends.
like,
It depends on where you want to ship to. You have UAE, you have Saudi, you have the whole Gulf, you have Indonesia, you have Malaysia, you've got Turkey. Like Quentin Gray said earlier, they have different standards. But if you want to follow the general ISO standard and just have the GSO 2055 and the ISO 17065, that is a start. Whether you're doing domestic or export, halal is halal. You cannot say, oh, I'm just doing this halfway because it's domestic. I'm doing it full because it's export. No. Halal is halal.
But the question, because your answer originally was you have to determine where you're going to export to. If you're not planning on exporting to, what are the options for that? You wouldn't have to go to
that's more difficult. That's
body.
more difficult and more expensive. It's more expensive and more difficult because you have to bring those people in to assess you. You need an accreditation body, an internationally recognized accreditation body like ISO, GSO, or HAC in Turkey, I just want to make something clear. Many people think that Malaysia and Indonesia or Singapore are accreditation bodies. They are not. They only certify for their countries. They are not an accreditation body. They are a certification body for their country only.
So there's no equivalent? I'm sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was going to say, with regard to the question that Marwan posted about the qualifications of a halal certifier, and also the question about how do you become a certifier. Quite often, I see people that are providing halal consulting get into the certification business. One of the things that is a big no-no is that certification bodies cannot be doing consulting at the same time.
Exactly. Or sell it.
They have to be impartial, independent, and if they're consulting a company at the same time they're certifying, it is not an internationally acceptable certification. So that's critical, making sure the organization that wants to be a certification body needs to understand the principles and the requirements of 17,065. And of course, if they can't live by those requirements, then they're not going to be able to be internationally accredited.
And Peter, can you tell them what it entails to be 17065. You cannot be a one man on a bicycle. You have to have offices, you have to have staff.
Yes, you do have to have substantial resources. Obviously, the human resources are all important, and you have to have competent auditors, you have to have competent decision makers, and there are some additional requirements with regard to halal certification bodies about the personnel requirements and the background in understanding Sharia, that kind of thing. And they have to act in certain ways too. There are standards for how auditors are to behave, how the decision-making process is done. There's a separate set of people that make the decisions. The auditors themselves do not make the decisions.
Thank you.
You cannot be a one-person certification body.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
That's by definition not possible under the standard for certification bodies.
Thank you. And then I would like to add to that, Peter. Many people think that it's very easy. You know, I'm a Muslim. I said Bismillah, it's okay. No, it's not that. It's a whole process. Everybody in the system, even the ones that are not going out in the field, the auditors, they need to have training to show that they have been trained. And if they don't have that certificate that they're trained, you will not be accredited, or they have to take the course.
It's not just training. There are requirements that the certification body must do ongoing performance monitoring, and the accreditation body will look for records supporting those to making sure the auditors continue to be competent, and that they actually will witness a sample of audits that the certification body performs to give assurance that they are indeed competent in doing the audits. And that is, unfortunately, an expensive process. And ideally, certification bodies should only have to have one accreditation. But the reality is, if accreditation bodies' accreditations are not recognized universally, certification bodies that want to offer services for the global market may have to get multiple accreditations. And that is unfortunate, and that's why the price for certification gets driven up by this unnecessary duplication and waste. So accrediting or creating more accreditation bodies, I don't think is the answer. Helping to have one international standard is certainly the effort that needs to be pursued, and I support the effort what CIMIC makes and tries perhaps to reduce the various national standards that get developed, maybe on the basis of the guidance from CIMIC, but then they add their own little differences, which causes unnecessary duplication. And the certification bodies have to take all that into account, which then increases the cost even further on certification.
Yeah, can I say one last thing, Elizabeth?
Yes. Yeah, we still have time.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think I even brought this up. Recently, I was in the World Halal Council virtual meeting, and the one for Halal News. We were hit with a big bill unexpectedly, even though we are accredited and certified by both IAC and JAC. We registered with ESMA, which is the government of Dubai, just to register that these products are done by us, about 1,000. And then for Saudi, they have an organization similar to ESMA, it's called SASO. They want 100,000. For what? Do we take money out of our pockets and just, or do we have a machine that makes money just to register that you are approved? They shouldn't charge us that much. I can understand 1,000 like ESMA, but 100,000? No way. It is, oh, who's going to pay for that? the Muslim consumer will eventually, the producer, whether it's Tyson's or American food groups or any big corporation, out there, or the food companies making the cereals or whatever, they will just add it to the price. If you want halal, your Muslims have to pay more. They don't worry about the 100,000. They will say, never mind, we'll add it to the price. Who pays? The Muslims. And it's not necessary. Those people we have paid and we are accredited. I don't see why we have to pay extra, just that kind of money, just to be registered under a different organization.
It sounds to me that perhaps there's issues of competition here, that the incentives for giving the accreditation perhaps are not really the way they should be. That if you're having to pay $100,000 for Dubai and $1,000 somewhere else,
it's other way around. Okay.
Okay, but it sounds to me like that's a way for them to keep your stuff out, which is
exactly.
If that were taken to a court in the US, would be an anti-competitive restraint on trade, probably. But not that I'm giving legal advice and saying go to court, but it seems like the incentives are kind of backwards. And what do you think the prospects are for kind of getting through this in the future?
Can I say one word, Elizabeth? And you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
If I'm in trouble, I'll come to you. It's called extortion. It's called extortion.
Well, yes, that's par for the course in Emirates.
So
yeah,
Malaysia, for example, they have a nice system. They don't charge that much. But if the guy is coming to do your work, if you don't give them a nice gift, you cannot be on their list. Okay.
Right. Well, but
these ones, they do it very well, but then you have to pay somebody who is a local Saudi in order for you to be listed, which is unfair.
Yes, but it's not just the halal trade. That happens across the board, and you kind of have to have sponsorship by somebody from the royal family.
It hurts the Muslims. We, for example, we as a certification body, we cannot sell the hot dogs that we are certifying, or we cannot sell the chicken that we are, certifying. So it's a complicated issue. Somebody asked me, okay, what kind of meat should I buy? I cannot tell them buy this one, only the one that I certified, because there are others who certify too. It's not fair. So I go by the rules, and I can sleep at night. I can snore very well because I know that I'm following the rules and the guidelines. So help me God.
Right. So there's an interesting question for Peter here in the chat from Brother Mansour Umar. Is it realistic to expect that an accreditation body from another country, whether it's Turkey, Saudi, or somewhere else, will be accepted internationally in any real world system? And if that's the case, what other real solution could Peter offer?
That's a good question. The point of these global networks of cooperation among accreditation bodies is set up to provide a solution to the cross-border acceptance of accreditations. The original bodies, as I mentioned earlier, International Accreditation Forum, that deals with certification body accreditation. And for halal only, a body that has been created by the UAE, Dubai, and is administered, the International Halal Accreditation Forum. Their main aim in life, their mission, is to provide a mutual recognition arrangement among participating accreditation bodies that is in effect saying these accreditation bodies are competent to accredit halal certification bodies, or for that matter, tested laboratories, inspection bodies, but primarily halal certification bodies. That's the purpose, so that they, in turn, these accreditation bodies throughout the world would promote the acceptance of their fellow mutual recognition agreement partners to their domestic market So the foreign accreditation of the certified product is more likely to be accepted in the domestic market. But you got to set up the system first and work on it and promote it before you do anything. On the certification level, cooperation among the certification bodies could also be a solution, because what we're worried about is you end up from a supplier of halal products. Gosh, I don't want to go to 110 countries certification bodies.
Right.
My product certified. It would be extremely expensive.
Exactly.
I want to have a domestic certification body that can provide a cost-effective domestic audit. The travel cost would be minimal, etc. And that certification be accepted globally. And the way we're trying to do it with the accreditation body cooperations is get these accreditations of certification bodies accepted. Otherwise, it's buyer beware. ABC certification body has no accreditation, claims they're certified and they following halal standards. It's a self-declaration. What confidence do we have that they actually are competent to do the certification? The accreditation is intended to provide the confidence to the marketplace that the certifications are indeed done by competent individuals. And of course, the system is set up. If halal products are found to be in the marketplace that have been certified by somebody that's accredited, complaints to the accreditation body
Exactly.
in order to follow up and investigate what is the certification body doing, allowing its clients to provide unacceptable product on the marketplace. That's what the system is intended to do. Any accreditation body that wants to accredit halal certification bodies should join these global networks in IHAF particularly. And they also, IHAF, the larger body that accredits certification bodies of all types. By the way, there is a cooperation among IHAF and IAF. IHAF has
Many people don't know what IHAF is. Can you tell them what that is?
Yeah, the International Halal Accreditation Forum. There is a body, International Accreditation Forum, that deals with all types of accreditation of certification bodies. They do peer evaluations of each other to, in effect, accept the equivalence of other people's accreditations to their own. And IHAF has a memorandum of understanding to participate in the peer evaluations of accreditation bodies that are recognized by IAF, so that a joint peer evaluation is done, and IHAF's evaluators will look at the accreditation body for how competent they are in doing accreditation of halal certification bodies. Again, to reduce duplication.
Can I
have each national government going out and assessing accreditation bodies or certification bodies. It just adds duplication to the system, and all those costs are overhead costs that come down to the producers that ends up making them having to raise their prices in the marketplace.
I want to add something. I want to.
Okay, Habib, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
2 minutes.
I remember brother Rafiq Mansour, who said something earlier about having our own in US, that is one way to do it. But I had suggested 3 years ago or 2 years ago in Kuala Lumpur to the accreditation bodies, which the World Halal Council is representative there. So technically I am there, but not on it's an independent organization. That I have, and the ILAB or whatever, I made a suggestion in front of 1,000 people that And the same thing I did with IAC and JAC or Malaysia. Why they are accrediting us as certification body? Instead of having 3 or 4 trips, why don't they get one person from IAC, one from JAC, one from CIMIC, one from, say, even Malaysia, JACIM or MUI? They come in one team and they come and do it so that every accreditation body has a representation and we do not have to duplicate it. So I agree with Ihsan that in the accreditation body themselves don't have a standard, so it's very difficult for them to manage us. But and it's really, the bottom line is sad that we have to have a single body like CIMIC, to give the standard, and then they have a group of assessors that will come instead of every country sending theirs. It's too expensive and too time consuming. Believe me, the American companies, the ones we deal with, are getting tired of being visited every 2-3 months by a different party. They say, what is going on? You're doing it correctly. Why every country has to bring their own person and we have to take them out for lunch? We have to pay for their hotel. We have to do this and we have to do. I don't want to even say what they say, so I'll keep my mouth shut. And thank you very much.
There is a comment, I think the Secretary General of CIMIC has made a comment, we lack a single standard. Although I'm a non-Muslim and I suppose I could never participate in helping to write a single standard, but I beseech CIMIC to tackle that issue and come up with a single standard for accreditation bodies and for certification bodies, and not have to rely on regional standards like GSO and country standards, and try to get rid of or minimize the proliferation of national standards and have one international standard that everybody can rely on.
Amen.
Most of these countries' governments are signatories to the World Trade Organization, and they have to abide by the obligations of the technical barriers to trade. And when countries write unique standards that have no economic or safety or health justification, it's a trade barrier. And we would hope that international standards could be adopted by all the countries to eliminate this duplication, and which inevitably raises costs.
Well, gentlemen, we're just about up at the end of our time here, and I want to thank you very much and remind our listeners and watchers here to please visit the vendors in the expo, visit their booths, do some networking, because that's what this is all about. And also, don't forget the polls here. We've got some great, interesting questions that get to some of these issues in the polls, and we'd love to hear from you because there's still a lot of research to be done. So the next panel will be in, not the next panel. In 10 minutes, we're going to have a fantastic cooking show with the marvelous Yvonne Maffei. So stand by for that. And thank you to Habib Ghanem and to Peter Unger for your very insightful remarks. And be sure and stick around to the end of the conference to hear who wins the awards. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And I hope that you are recording this so others will benefit from it. We don't know how long we would live, so I'm,
Right.
I'm at the end of my life now, Thank you.
You're still very much vibrant. Yes, we are recording, so this will be put on the site.
Thank you very much. And I want to also personally thank Ihsan for his good job. In all honesty, they're trying their best, but they're having blockages from people like Malaysia, Indonesia, and others who want their own. Even though Peter said we are WTO, we all have to have mutual recognition, but they're trying to block CIMIC, which I cannot understand why. So it's amazing, it's amazing. And Rafiq mentioned about the cost of paying thousands. And if he doesn't mind, I'll give you an example. Here he's doing it.
Well, 10 seconds, 10
Okay,
seconds. We've got to give people a break.
Well, it's about cost. He had a client that could not export, so they had to come to us. So because we're already approved in that country, so it's complicated. But I am praying to God that we have the success of CIMIC and at Exxon, and we have one great accreditation body, so all of us, no matter where we are from, can have mutual recognition. Thank you very much.
Inshallah. All right. Thank you,
Elizabeth-
gentlemen.